This video is going to walk you through how to prepare for an essay exam. So, in my opinion, prepping for an essay exam takes just as much thought and careful consideration of your actions as prepping for an essay. Do you write out the essay for the exam? No, because you might not know the question. But you do spend more time researching and getting prepared than you do in the moment of doing it. And this change is huge on how well essay exams go. So, what will you need to do in order to prep? Well, you'll need to make time to study, but you'll also need to make time to plan, and this video will walk you through how to use your time. So, one of the problems that students encounter when they are prepping for or studying for an essay exam is that they think what's going to make the exam tough is the questions. And in truth, if you know the material, the questions aren't going to be what makes it tough. What's going to make it tough is that there's stress that comes with being in an essay exam. And because of that stress, students often do not actually answer the question they have been asked. Let me say that again. Students do not answer the question they've been asked. They pour a ton of information down onto the page, but they're not actually answering the question. So let's talk about the different types of questions that happen in an essay exam, because if you can identify the question type, you have a much better chance of actually answering the question. And what does that equal? A good grade on the exam. So let's look through how to do that. In general, there are 3 types of questions that will end up on an essay exam. So not that every exam will have all 3, but if you are taking an essay exam, it's probably one or more of these types of questions. You will either encounter questions that want you to list what you know. These are straight memorization questions. You might encounter questions that want you to explain an idea or a theory or a concept, or to explain how to do a process. You might also encounter questions that want you to form an opinion and support it. So just imagine what might happen. Let's say a question is asking you to explain a process, right? So explain the process of global warming. Let's say the student answers by giving an opinion. I think global warming shows that we are consuming too much waste and creating problems in our environment. The question didn't ask what you thought. The question asked you to explain global warming, not what you think about global warming. See how that could happen? So these are your 3 types of questions. Get familiar with them. It will help you. List questions are the easiest. What do they need? They need a list to answer them. So for example, a list question might look like this. Identify the concerns with privacy Pell identifies in his argument, maybe. Okay, so list the concerns with privacy that Mr. Pell identifies in his article. Maybe you know that there are 3 concerns that Pell brings up: facial recognition and judgment, and facial recognition with advertising. So there's 3 different concerns. You're being asked to give the list. You give the list. Question is done. What's the strategy for being good at this type of question? You need to create some sort of word or memory trigger for the list. So perhaps when I look at this list, I think, okay, I don't want to memorize all these words. What I want to memorize is security, judgment, advertising. All 3 of them have to do with facial recognition. but it's security, judgment, advertising. SJA. So then I figure, okay, I'm going to memorize the letters SJA. If I get a question on concerns with privacy and Pell, I'm going to say, oh, okay, the answer is facial recognition. What's my list? SJA. And that's going to remind me security, judgment, advertising. Boom, I'm done. More complicated than a list, idea or explanation questions ask you to show your understanding. They want you to demonstrate that you understand this idea. They want you to show your work. My suggestion for how to do this is something I call the DES method. DES stands for define, explain, support. So if you are asked to explain something, start by defining the concept, then explain the concept, and in your explanation, use specific support to back it up. So if you had a question like, what is online privacy and why should users be concerned? Your answer might be, online privacy is a value and assumption that information shared online with a specific party will not be shared with others. That is the definition of online privacy. Then I need to explain it and support it. There are a number of concerns with online privacy. I ramp myself right into being able to explain that. And then for each concern, I'm going to explain the concern and the test that proved that concern. So I'm going to define it, I'm going to explain it, and then as part of my explanation, I'm going to include specific examples or studies or things that have been talked about in class to back my point up. Probably the most tricky, opinion questions are just like writing an argument. An opinion question needs you to use what I call the OEE method. Opinion, example, explanation. Most of the time in an essay exam, you are not going to be asked to include specifically quoted material because you're doing it in a timed environment. So it's not like an essay. You're not going to have to pull quotes usually, but you are going to have very specific examples to back up your point. So if you get a question that asks for your opinion and to support it, that's exactly what you need to do. First, make sure you state your opinion. Don't just start talking about it. Be really clear. Just like in a paper, get your thesis or your claim out there. State your opinion. Include specific examples from the text or the film or the class discussion or whatever it is that you're referencing. And then make sure to explain each of those examples fully. In other words, do the analysis. Show your work. So if your opinion is asked, give your opinion first, include specific examples to back up your opinion, and for each of your examples, explain how that example reinforces your opinion. Now let's talk a little bit about how to specifically prep. No matter what type of questions you might encounter, you need to prepare before an essay exam. To say, I studied the material, therefore I will do good, is completely bananas. It's a process. Practice for the process. You'll do so much better. First, review your notes. That seems pretty easy, right? I suggest organizing your notes into your main ideas and your examples. Right now, you might just have a cluster of notes. Instead, organize them. What are the main things that you talked about in relation to this thing that you're studying? What are the examples that go with it that were either part of your class discussions or your reading? Then build a note sheet that has those main ideas and those examples easily accessible for you, so you can quickly look at the note sheet and find your information. Then you should start getting ready to practice. Think back to class discussions or materials or videos or however you've encountered these ideas for class. And play professor. say, if I were the professor, knowing my professor, knowing the other things we've done in class, if I were the professor and I'd done this material, which questions would I ask? What would I likely ask? So anticipate those, write them down. What's your best guess? What do you think they're going to talk about, right? What has been discussed in class? Practice forming an outline as a way to answer each of the questions you anticipate. So if you think the instructor is going to ask question A, whatever that is, how would you answer question A? And then after you build your potential question and your potential answer, memorize an outline or a word cluster to help you remember how you plan to answer. So maybe I anticipate that there's going to be a question about global warming. So I practice answering how global warming happens, and I also practice answering what my opinion is on why global warming is occurring, so that I'm prepared for both of those questions, should they be asked. Okay, so you've prepped, you've got a note sheet, you've practiced, you've anticipated the questions, you're feeling pretty solid. Let's talk about what to do when you get into the exam, because that's when your heart might race and your best decisions might not happen. So let's make a game plan for that. During the exam, dissect the question to see what type it is. So the first thing you do, look at that question and figure out what move do I need to make as a writer in response to this question? Is it a list question? Does it need a list from me? Is it an idea and explanation question? Am I going to need to define and explain and support? Is it an opinion and support question where I'm going to have to offer my opinion and then give examples and back those up? First thing I need to do, label what type of question. That helps me to know what type of answer I need to give. Then make an outline in the margins or the notes of what you need to say. So once I know what type of answer I need to give, I'm going to just take a moment in the margins and make a quick note. Or if I'm taking an online essay exam, I'm going to have a piece of scratch paper and I'm going to say, okay, what is it I want to say? I'm not going to just start typing. I'm going to quickly make an outline for myself to follow. As I type or as I write in class, I'm going to use that outline to keep me on track, to make sure I don't go start talking about something way out of the realm of what I need. And I'm going to check off that outline as I go. So if I know that I need to define global warming, explain the main causes of it, and explain what's contributing to it, or explain the main causes and then explain 3 solutions or something like that, okay? Before I start typing my answer, I'm going to make an outline and I'm going to say define main causes, and I'm just going to make quick words for myself, and then after that I'll say solutions and a quick set of words for myself. It probably takes me less than 2 minutes to make that outline. I set that outline next to me, and as I write, I check off those pieces as I finish them. Between questions, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to give myself 30 seconds, and I'm going to breathe. This is incredibly important. If you get stressed, it's harder to focus. You have enough time to give yourself 30 seconds. Finish your first question. You've marked off the pieces of your outline. Breathe. Go to your next question. Let's say you're working on a question and there's a part of it you don't know. You look at your outline and you're like, gosh, I don't remember that second thing. Do everything else. Leave that one section undone, but at least do the other pieces. Give as much information as you can that needs to be there, and nothing that you don't. When you finish, leave 15% of your time, if you can, to review and polish at the end. You can always go back. You never know. If you skipped over a part of a question, by the time you get done, you might have remembered it and you can add it back in. So plan on leaving yourself 10 to 15% of the time to go back and check over. I hope this helps.